Three friends start the exact same week. Same job, same body, same routine. One makes two tiny changes, reads a few pages a day, cuts a little junk food. The second changes nothing. The third picks up a couple of small bad habits. 10 months in, you honestly can't tell them apart. But somewhere around month 31, the gap detonates. One is transformed, one is worse off, and one is sitting exactly where he started. Darren Hardy spent decades studying that exact gap, and he laid the whole answer out in the compound effect. Because what separates those three isn't luck, and it isn't talent. It's math. The quiet, ruthless math of small choices multiplied by time. In this video, we'll trace the whole curve. The microwave mindset that makes you quit way too early. The compound curve that hides your progress for months. And Big Mo, the momentum that's brutal to start, but nearly unstoppable once it turns over. Plus the one simple tracking system almost every high performer swears by. This is the video that finally explains why staying consistent is even worth it. And here's the trap. The breakthrough almost always sits just past the point where quitting feels most reasonable. Walk away there and you don't just lose the goal. You teach yourself that effort doesn't pay. People rarely fail at the math, they fail at the waiting. So hang on to the end. That's where I'll show you the rhythm register I built for myself. It's the dead simple board that carried me through the months my own channel had nothing to show for it. This is the one that ties the whole series together. Okay, let's get to work. So let's start with the man who wrote all this down. Darren Hardy didn't grow up soft. His father was a college football coach, and the house ran on one rule: no pain, no gain. 6 in the morning, iron plates hitting the floor of a home gym. Missing school wasn't really an option, unless, in his father's words, you were showing bone. He's not saying that to sound tough on a page. That's just the house he grew up in. And it clearly worked. He was pulling in more than $1 million a year at 24. A company doing over $50 million a year by 27. Then 2 decades running Success magazine as publisher and editorial director. Interviewing some of the most accomplished people alive, chasing one question: what actually separates them? His mentor through most of it was Jim Rohn, one of the actual godfathers of the entire personal development industry, decades before anyone called it that. Here's the answer Hardy kept landing on, book after book, interview after interview. It's never one big decision. He defines the compound effect as this: reaping enormous rewards from a string of small choices. Choices so small, most people don't even notice they're making them. No dramatic turning point, no single leap. Just math, running quietly in the background of your life, whether you're paying attention or not. If that sounds like a nice idea, but not a real force, Hardy has a thought experiment that ends the argument fast. Someone offers you $3 million, cash, right now. Or a single penny, doubled every day for 31 days straight. Take the money and keep walking, right? Watch what happens if you don't. By day 10, your doubling penny is worth about $5. By day 20, with only 11 days left, it's crawled up to $5,200. You're nowhere near $3 million, and if you're honest, you're feeling pretty smug about your decision. Then day 31 arrives. That penny was the joke for 3 straight weeks. Now, it's worth more than $10.7 million, over 3 times the cash you turned down. That's not motivation, that's arithmetic. And it's the exact same arithmetic running underneath every habit you have right now, good or bad. Whether you can feel it moving yet or not. And here's what Hardy won't let you do with that arithmetic: hand it all to luck. Good luck or bad, the math doesn't much care. It just quietly adds up whatever you actually do, day after day. And that includes the story about to unfold. 3 ordinary friends who all started on the exact same day. If you want the full case Hardy makes, with the research and the worksheets. I'll leave a link to the book in the description. It's a short read and honestly worth every page. So if the math is this obvious, why does almost nobody feel it while it's actually happening? Stick with me. By the halfway point, I'll show you how to find the first number worth tracking in your own life. But first, you need to see why this stays invisible for so long. That's where this gets interesting. Let's call this one the invisible curve. For most of its life, this is a curve you cannot see, and that's exactly what makes it dangerous. Hardy has a name for why we struggle to feel this arithmetic in real time. He calls it the microwave mentality. Almost everything around us has trained us to expect the result now, and to only ever see the result, never the weight behind it. Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert has a thought experiment that makes that blindness impossible to miss. Imagine every single person holding a losing lottery ticket got 30 seconds on television to stand up and say, "I lost." Just 30 seconds each, one at a time. Gilbert's estimate? It would take almost 9 straight years of non-stop broadcasting to get through all the losers from one single drawing. 9 years, and we never watch a second of it. We only ever see the one winner instantly holding the giant check. So of course, our brains reset what normal looks like around that one rare instant moment. We come to expect the check and never picture the 9 years. That's the microwave mentality, and it's exactly what makes a 31-month curve feel unbearable back at month 10. Picture 3 friends, Larry, Scott, and Brad. Same starting salary, same body type, same neighborhood, same job, same Friday nights. Nothing separates them at the starting line, which is the whole point. Scott makes 2 changes, about 10 pages of something useful to read every day. Roughly 125 calories cut from his diet, basically 1 soda. Brad goes the other way. Bigger TV, greasier dinners off the Food Network, 1 extra glass of wine a week. Larry does nothing, doesn't improve, doesn't ruin himself either, just coasts. Here's the part that should scare you a little. 5 months in, no visible difference. 10 months in, still nothing you could point to in a photo. Line the 3 of them up at month 10. You genuinely could not tell who was winning. 18 months is the earliest point where the smallest gap becomes measurable. 25 months, it's obvious. 27, it's uncomfortable to look at. And 31 months, that's when it detonates. Take just one of Scott's 2 changes, that small daily calorie cut. Stretched across 940 days, it quietly strips off about 33.5 pounds. Now here's the part people miss. Brad spent those exact same days drifting the opposite way, adding calories instead of cutting them. So you don't just count what Scott lost. You add what Brad gained on top. That's how 2 men who started identical end up 67 pounds apart. Same starting line. 2.5 years later, different bodies, different lives. And now you know precisely why. But here's the part most habit content skips entirely. It never stays in one lane. Brad's habit rippled. Bad sleep from late-night junk food made him groggier at work, shorter-tempered too. That created real friction with his boss. The friction drove more stress eating, just to cope. The stress eating killed the energy for evening walks with his wife. Less connection at home, more distance. One small habit, and 2.5 years later, it's touched his health, his career, and his marriage. Dominoes he barely noticed falling. It works exactly the same way in reverse, too, even when things start out great. Hardy tells the story of a restaurant in San Diego that opened close to perfect. Spotless, fast, genuinely great service. Success rolled in, and slowly, invisibly, standards slipped. A little less attention here, a shortcut there. Nothing any single customer would notice on any single visit. 18 months after opening, the place was bankrupt. Nothing fails like success. Quietly compounding in the wrong direction, the exact same curve running backward. But run that same curve forward, patiently, and it looks like Beverly. a sales rep carrying extra weight who wanted to run a half marathon for her 20-year reunion. 13.1 miles, a distance she couldn't have imagined finishing. She didn't start by running. She walked a 1-mile loop 3 times a week for 2 weeks. Then she started jogging small stretches of it. It took her 7 full weeks just to jog that first mile without stopping. From there, she added 1/8 of a mile every time out. 6 months in, she was covering 9 miles. 9 months in, 13.5, more than the reunion required. She lost over 40 pounds along the way, her sales numbers doubled, and she went on to run a full marathon after that. Nobody watching week 1 would have believed week 39 was coming. So here's the question this section is actually asking you. If you've been doing everything right for a few months and still don't see it, does that mean it isn't working? Or does it just mean you're standing somewhere between month 5 and month 25 at the exact point where the curve still looks flat? That's the trap. And it's not even the scariest part of this video. Because if the curve stays invisible for that long, there has to be a physical reason it does. And a reason it eventually breaks. Hardy has a name for the force behind that 31-month explosion. He calls it Big Mo, momentum personified. Like a silent partner who's been backing Bill Gates, Michael Jordan, and Serena Williams the entire time. None of us ever noticed him in the room. You can't see Big Mo. You can't hand him to somebody. But you absolutely know the difference between having him and not having him. And the reason comes straight out of physics, not self-help. Newton's first law, an object at rest stays at rest. An object in motion stays in motion. Hardy didn't invent that for the book. That's just how the universe runs. And it applies to your habits, whether you like it or not. Picture a merry-go-round on a playground. The single hardest moment of the whole ride is the first push. Getting a dead still wheel to move at all. Once it's turning, a light tap keeps it going. A rocket burns more fuel in its first few minutes fighting off the launch pad than in the entire rest of the flight. The starting cost is always the highest cost, and nobody warns you about that part. Michael Phelps and his coach, Bob Bowman, built their entire partnership around this idea. 12 years, 12 of an unbroken daily routine. All of it before Phelps walked out of the 2008 Beijing Olympics with 8 gold medals. Here's the detail that actually gets me. In 12 years, Bowman let him cut a single practice short. 15 minutes, so Phelps could go to a school dance. Once. In 12 years. Jack Nicklaus ran the same discipline on the golf course. His pre-shot routine, timed across an entire major championship, never varied by more than a second. First hole to the 18th. Now compare that to Greg Norman at the 1996 Masters. His pre-shot routine visibly sped up, hole by hole, as the pressure mounted. His rhythm fell apart. Then his lead did too. Same sport, same stakes. One man protected his rhythm under pressure. The other let pressure eat it whole. You'll see the identical shape off the field too. The iPod lost ground its first full year on the market and didn't really take off until year 4. YouTube spent its first year looking like nothing, right up until Google paid $1.65 billion for it. Every overnight success is just a compound curve nobody watched the slow, boring middle of. There's a reason consistency beats intensity here too. Restarting a dead still habit always costs more than keeping a moving one moving, and most people never do the math on what a single pause actually charges them. So what does building Big Mo actually take? Hardy breaks it into 5 moves, and each one only works if the one before it is already in place. Let me run all 5 through a single example. Someone who's always meant to learn a language but never stuck with it. Move 1. Choice. Pick something that actually lines up with what matters to you, not a random New Year's resolution. I want to talk to my grandmother in her own language, beats I should learn Spanish. Move 2. Action. Turn that choice into one thing you can physically do this week. Not become fluent. 10 minutes on one app tonight. Move 3. Repetition. Do that same action enough times that it stops feeling like a decision. The first week, you talk yourself into opening the app. By week 3, the 10 minutes just happen. Move 4, routine. Wrap the habit in a fixed time, a trigger, a place. Same chair, same app, right after your morning coffee. Now it runs on autopilot instead of willpower. Move 5, and this is the hard one, rhythm. Keep it going longer than feels reasonable, past the point it seems to be doing anything at all. That's the Phelps step. The talent was never really the point. What set him apart was 12 years of nobody letting him stop. That last move is where almost everyone falls off. Starting is the most expensive moment. Momentum is what makes everything after it easier. Which means there has to be one exact point where quitting costs you the most. And it turns out that point isn't random at all. It even has a name. Here's an image that's been used on farms for over a century, long before anyone was writing books about habits. The hand pump well. You grab the handle and start pumping. For a while, nothing comes out. No water, no proof it's working. Just a tired arm and a very reasonable sounding suspicion that you're pumping a dry well. Most people let go right there. But underground, the mechanism is building suction the entire time you pump, even with zero visible payoff. Keep going, and eventually water breaks the surface. Once it's flowing, it takes almost nothing to keep it coming. Just steady, light pressure. Now here's the part that should genuinely worry you, and it's the part Big Mo never warns you about. Let go of that handle for too long after the water's flowing, and it doesn't just pause. It drains all the way back down to the bottom of the well. Next time, you're not picking up where you left off. You're starting the entire dry, arm-burning process over again, from zero. So quitting isn't neutral. It charges you the full startup cost a second time. That's the real physical shape of walking away. There's something every endurance cyclist learns on a brutal mountain climb, the kind that grinds on for 18 miles. Somewhere partway up, every rider meets his real opponent. And it isn't the other cyclists, it's himself. Muhammad Ali understood the same thing from the opposite angle. The fight was against George Foreman in 1974, the one everyone now calls the Rumble in the Jungle. Ali spent 7 full rounds absorbing punishment on the ropes. He let Foreman throw everything he had. Foreman, not Ali, hit the wall first. Ali knocked him out in round 8. He didn't outfight Foreman, he outlasted him, on purpose. Or take a smaller, less mythic example. A college football coach named Lou Holtz, whose team was down 42-0 at halftime. He didn't give a rousing speech. He just showed them film of themselves making a second effort. The extra half step nobody's usually watching for. They came back and won the second half. Hardy's line for all 3 of these stories is the same. It's not about reaching the wall. It's about what you do in the 10 seconds after you hit it. Because those 10 seconds, statistically, are exactly when most people let go of the pump handle. So think about your own well right now. Is there a place in your life where you've been pumping for months with nothing to show for it? And you're maybe 3 strokes from water. Right at the exact moment it feels most rational to walk away. Now, I'll be straight with you. Not every well has water. Some efforts genuinely won't pay off, and no honest video can promise otherwise. But quitting 3 strokes early guarantees you never find out. And it quietly teaches you that pumping never works, when the truth is you just stopped too soon. That's the trap this whole video is warning you about. But knowing the trap exists isn't the same as spotting it in your own life in real time. For that, you need something a lot less poetic than a well. You need a number. Hardy's answer for closing a gap you can't even feel has a name, the scorecard. Here's exactly why you need one. Here's a stat from professional golf that should honestly bother you a little. In a recent men's world ranking, the gap between the #1 golfer and the #10 golfer was small. Just 1.9 strokes per round on average, a 2.7% difference in performance. And the gap in prize money between those 2 ranks? More than 5 times as much, over $10 million versus about $2 million. A 2.7% difference in skill. A 500% difference in outcome. Read that twice, because it's the entire compound effect in one sentence. So how do you close a gap that small when you can't even feel it happening day to day? Hardy's answer isn't complicated, and it isn't glamorous. It's a scorecard. Pick one area of your life. Write down every single relevant action, every day, without exception, for 3 straight weeks. Take Kathleen, a personal assistant making $40,000 a year. She started tracking her spending. She found 1% she could redirect into savings without changing her lifestyle at all. Next month, 2%. She kept nudging it up. Years later, she'd started her own business, was earning over $250,000 a year, and had crossed $1 million in net worth. Now, be honest, the scorecard didn't make Kathleen rich. Building a business did that. But ask her, and she'll tell you she never sees that business without first seeing the 1%. The tracking didn't create the money. It made the invisible visible, early enough to act on. That's the whole job of a scorecard. Even a $4 coffee, skipped each day and invested instead at a normal market return, quietly grows into tens of thousands of dollars across 20 years. You just never feel it leaving your pocket at the register. Time does that same quiet multiplying on its own, if you start early enough. One person invests a small amount every month from age 23, then stops completely at 40 and never adds another dollar. A second person waits until 40 to begin and keeps investing all the way to 67, putting in far more of their own money than the first one ever did. The early starter still ends up with over $1 million. The late starter with less than a third of that. Same return, same effort. The only difference is when the clock started. That's the compound effect doing the work for you, with almost no extra input. Tracking doesn't even have to be financial to move the needle. Hardy tells the story of a CEO named Phil. His company did over $100 million a year, and he hadn't spoken to 80% of his own staff in 5 years. His one change? Walking the office floor 3 times a week, personally acknowledging at least 3 people each time. 18 months later, net profit was up more than 30%. Same headcount, 0 extra marketing spend. One habit, tracked and repeated. That was the whole strategy. And underneath every one of these scorecards sits the rule Hardy hammers from page 1. Take ownership. Not because everything that happens to you is your fault. Plenty of it isn't, and no 2 people start from the same place. But because your response is always yours to control, and you can't track or fix what you've decided isn't yours to own. Hardy lives it too. Early in his career, a business partner mismanaged funds so badly that he walked away over $330,000 poorer. He didn't sue. He didn't blame the partner. He logged it as his own call and moved on. So pick one number this week. Not everything. One thing you can track daily without it becoming a chore. Because once you can actually see the tiny movement, something else becomes possible. You stop just protecting the gains you're making. You start looking for a way to multiply them instead of just adding to them. There's one more move here, and it's the one that ties the math and the momentum together. Multiplying your results instead of just adding to them. Remember that doubling penny from earlier? The one that turned 3 weeks of nothing into over $10 million by day 31. Here's the part of that experiment almost nobody runs all the way to the end. What happens if, on top of the daily doubling, you also add one extra doubling, once a week, across those same 31 days? That's only 4 or 5 more doublings in the whole month. But because each one doubles everything that came before it, the result doesn't nudge up a little. It jumps from just under $11 million to $171 million. One extra multiplication, applied at the right moment, doesn't add to your results. It multiplies them. Bodybuilders have understood this instinctively for decades, long before anyone wrote a book about it. Arnold Schwarzenegger built part of his training around what Hardy calls the cheating principle. The reps that actually change your body aren't reps 1 through 10 of a 12-rep set. They're the last 3, the ones you grind out after your body is already begging you to stop. Those final few push the muscle past what it's used to, and that overload is the only thing that forces it to grow. Everything before them just gets you to the part that counts. Oprah Winfrey ran an accidental public version of the same principle in September of 2004. She'd planned to give away 11 cars to 11 audience members who genuinely needed one. That was already a generous, satisfying, planned moment, the kind of thing that makes headlines on its own. Instead, she kept going, past the plan, past what anyone was expecting, until all 276 people in that studio audience had keys in their hands. Everybody gets a car. That line didn't come from the 11 cars everyone expected. It came from what happened after the plan was technically already done. So here's the pattern across all 3 of these: the penny, the last 3 reps, the extra cars. The disproportionate return never comes from the part everyone else also does. It comes from the part that happens after most people have already decided they're finished. Ask yourself, honestly, is there one place right now where you've hit what feels like your max? And have you been treating that as the finish line instead of the actual starting point for the results that would set you apart? Because none of this protects you on its own. Not the math, not the momentum, not the pump well, not the scorecard, not the multiplying. Not unless you have one more thing. A way to see your own rhythm, day to day, in real time, before you drift off it without noticing. And I'm not talking theory here. This is the one tool I actually built for myself. The one I promised you at the very start of this video. Quick distinction, because these two can blur together. The scorecard from a few minutes ago is about the number, what you're tracking. This one is about the rhythm. Whether you're actually showing up for it, week after week, not just the one week you felt motivated. Darren Hardy calls his own version of this a rhythm register. It's a tool built inside a bigger system he runs, a whole goal tracking program he calls Living Your Best Year Ever. And at its core, it's stupidly simple. Plan, do, review, improve. Every single week, forever. His mornings run like clockwork. Alarm at 5, and then 8 minutes of intentional snoozing, on purpose, running through what he's grateful for before he even gets up. Coffee, a little movement, some reading. Then 1 full hour of total focus on his single most important project, before he lets himself open email at all. That's the part that actually matters. Protecting the first hour every single day from the thing that eats everyone else's mornings alive. His evenings mirror it, comparing what actually happened against the plan. Writing any insight into one of what's now more than 40 journals, 10 pages of something inspiring before the light goes off. And every Sunday evening, he runs what he calls a relationship review with his wife. He scores the week, 1 to 10, and asks one question: what would have made it a 10? That's his rhythm. It doesn't have to be yours. What I want to hand you is the actual mechanism behind it. Because I built my own, much smaller version of this exact thing. And it's the honest reason my channel is still standing. Here's the real version of my story. When I started this channel, there were entire stretches, real months, where the numbers just didn't move. No obvious traction, no proof any of it was working. Nothing you could point to and say, see, that's paying off. I could have been Larry from that opening story, coasting on nothing. Or worse, quitting right at the exact moment the water was about to break the surface. What actually got me through it was a board, nothing fancy. 3 or 4 rows, one for each thing I knew mattered. Writing, filming, actually engaging with the handful of people watching. 7 columns, one for each day. A check mark or an empty box. That's the entire system. No spreadsheet formulas, no fancy app, just a grid I could look at in 10 seconds. Instantly, I'd know whether this week actually looked like the last one, or whether I'd quietly let something slip. Some weeks were almost all check marks. Some weeks had gaps I wasn't proud of. Neither kind of week ever felt like proof the whole thing was working. That's the entire point of an invisible curve. But looking at 8, 10, 12 weeks of that grid side by side, that's where you actually see the rhythm. Not any single day. Every Sunday, one question, straight out of Hardy's own playbook. What score would I give myself this week? And what's the one thing that would have made it a 10? Not a grade to feel bad about. A steering wheel. That board is the exact thing I promised you at the start of this video. It's the thing that carried me through the months this channel had nothing to show for itself. It's about as unglamorous as a tool gets, and it's visible every single week, which is the one thing quitting always depends on you not having. So if you take one thing from this entire video, take this. Build something, anything, that lets you see your own rhythm before you drift off it. Because you will drift. Everyone does. The only question is whether you notice in week 2 or in month 25. Remember Larry, Scott, and Brad? 3 friends who started that exact same week, completely impossible to tell apart for almost a year? Now you have the answer for why that changed by month 31. It was never talent, and it was never luck. It was the compound effect. Not a metaphor, but a mathematical certainty. In video 1, Duhigg showed us why habits form. In video 2, Robbins showed us how to start one. In video 3, Fogg showed us how to design one. In video 4, Clear gave us the complete system. Today, Hardy showed us why it's worth staying consistent for years, even when you can't see it working yet. But there's one question none of these 5 books fully answer. What do you do on the days you have nothing left, when motivation is at 0, and quitting feels like the only rational choice? That's not a habits problem anymore. That's a willpower problem. Kelly McGonigal spent her career at Stanford studying exactly that. Go watch The Willpower Instinct next. I promise it changes how you see every habit you just built.